Marcus Aurelius, could write hundreds of pages about how to master oneself, but could not sleep without opium. This is not a rumor. These are the words of Galen, his personal physician. Galen recorded that the emperor used, theriac every day, a medicinal mixture common in Roman times which contained poppy juice. Once, Marcus felt drowsy in the middle of work, so he had the poppy ingredient removed. That night, he could not sleep. With the drug, he was foggy. Without it, he stayed awake all night. A man standing at the peak of Roman power, a philosopher who wrote about self-control and discipline, yet his body was still pulled back and forth between two extremes that he could not fully control. If, Marcus Aurelius was like that, then for thousands of ordinary people in the ancient world, what happened when they fell into the same trap? Opium did not enter history as a demon. It entered as medicine. To ancient people, a drop of resin from the poppy plant could silence pain when there was no other choice. It was something that helped the sick sleep, something that made a long night feel less like punishment. There was no term opioid addiction, no rehabilitation center, no one to explain nerve receptors or withdrawal syndrome. There was only a person who began to lose the ability to live normally without it, and the people around them did not know what to call it. So how did ancient people pull someone out of that loop? The answer does not begin with a secret method. It begins with a very dangerous misunderstanding. In ancient Egypt, more than 3,500 years ago, there was a famous medical text that today we call the Ebers Papyrus. It was not a medical book in the modern sense. It was a world where herbs, healing formulas, magic, and prayers existed together on the same sheet of papyrus. But in that world, illness was not only biological, it could be an imbalance. It could be the gods, evil, forces, something that needed medicine but also ritual. So if someone trembled, could not sleep, ached, and desperately searched for opium again, ancient people might not have thought this was physical dependence. They might have thought this person's body was disordered. This person's mind was weak, this person's soul was unsettled, or the gods were angry, or simply that the old pain had never disappeared. The same phenomenon, but called by many different names. And when a problem is given the wrong name, the cure can easily go in the wrong direction too. In Greek and Roman medicine, the poppy plant was not unfamiliar. Dioscorides, a Greek physician who lived in the 1st century, wrote De Materia Medica, a work on medicinal substances that influenced many centuries. For ancient people, medicinal plants were the arsenal of medicine, and opium was in that arsenal. It helped people sleep, soothed pain, and made the body stop screaming. When there was no better option, a physician could look at a writhing patient and think, if something can help this person survive tonight, should I use it? The answer was often yes. The problem was not the first time. The problem was the time after that, and the time after that again, and the day the body began to remember what had saved it. Opium was dangerous, not because ancient people were completely naive about it. It was dangerous because it was useful. If a substance only caused harm, humans would avoid it more easily. But a substance that both soothed pain and brought sleep and made the sick person feel as if their body had been returned to them for a few hours, that is far harder to refuse. Imagine a Roman soldier returning after a campaign, his old wound throbbing when the weather turns cold. At night, he cannot sleep. A physician gives him something that eases the pain. The next morning, he can stand up. A few days later, he needs it again. Then not only on the worst days of pain, but even on ordinary days, the shadow of the medicine jar begins to appear. No one in that room thinks they are creating a case of addiction. The patient thinks he is enduring pain. The physician thinks he is treating pain. The family thinks they are saving someone from a night that cannot be endured. Only when the drug is taken away do they see a different person appear. Cold skin, twisting intestines, eyes wide open through the night, sweat clinging to the back, joints aching as if being pulled apart. And in the mind, there is only one thought repeating, like a knock on the door. Just one more time. Modern people might call that withdrawal syndrome. Ancient people called it by many names: weakness, imbalance, a disturbed soul, a bad habit, punishment, a shameful family secret. This is the cruelest part. The person in pain did not suffer only from the lack of the drug. They also suffered from the way others misunderstood that withdrawal. If the people beside them did not understand, they saw only chaos. Someone begging, getting angry, making promises, collapsing, then begging again, not because they did not want to try, but because their body was sending signals as if the absence of that substance was a matter of survival. In the eyes of an ancient family, that scene might not look like illness. It might look like character breaking down, but not like illness. So what did they do? The most direct method was to cut off the supply, hide the medicine jar, guard the patient, take them away from places where the drug could be found, use admonition, shame, discipline, and ritual to keep them from returning to it. But cutting off the supply does not mean healing. It only opens the door straight into withdrawal. And withdrawal is where every theory about willpower is tested against skin, gut, bones, and sleepless nights. Ancient people did not treat addiction in the modern sense. They tried to do something cruder, more painful, and less certain. Pull a person out of the loop. Pain, use the drug, calm down. Come down, lack the drug, hurt worse, seek the drug, calm down, then lack it again. That loop did not exist, only in the body. It existed in the whole room, in the family's eyes, in the physician's hands, in the question no one wanted to say aloud. Is giving this person the drug, saving them, or tying them down even tighter? Marcus Aurelius makes that question more uncomfortable. Because if we talk only about a nameless person, it is easy to imagine addiction as the story of weak people on the margins of society. But Marcus was not on the margins. He was an emperor. He was a man with power. He was a man who wrote about how not to be ruled by pleasure and pain. And yet his own body may have stepped into that gray zone. Galen did not leave us a complete withdrawal record, no day-by-day diary, no modern diagnosis, no line saying with certainty that Marcus Aurelius was addicted to opium in the way we understand it today. But the detail that he used theriac daily, felt drowsy when the poppy ingredient was present, then lost sleep when it was removed is enough to create an image that is hard to dismiss. A man trying to govern an entire empire, yet still having to negotiate with his own sleep. A man who wrote that the mind should stand firm before life's changes, but whose body reminded him that philosophy does not make the nerves stop reacting. This is where history becomes deeply human. Marcus Aurelius does not make the story of opium more certain, he makes it more ambiguous. And that ambiguity is what makes it feel real. Because if a famous emperor left us only scattered traces, then thousands of ordinary people almost completely disappeared from the historical record. We do not know their names. We do not know what rooms they lay in. We do not know who hid the drug, who stayed awake with them, who got through it, who returned to it, who was abandoned. Those people had no stone statues, no writings, no famous physician recording their cases. They left only a gap in the history of pain. And within that gap, we can imagine very imperfect ways of withdrawal. Some people were cared for by family through each night. Some were bound by shame. Some were taken to temples where illness was treated with rest and prayers. Some were given baths, food, and a change of environment. Some were punished, some were seen as fallen. Some were loved, and some were left alone with a body betraying them. But those methods were not modern treatment plans. There was no standard dose, no safely controlled medication support, no psychotherapy in today's sense. Sometimes they worked, sometimes they failed. Sometimes they helped a person reach the other side. Sometimes they only made them more isolated. But ancient people were not completely powerless. They knew how to observe. They knew how to separate someone from the old environment. They knew how to care and supervise. They knew how to pray when no other tools remained. And sometimes, just having someone sit beside you through the night was already the crudest form of treatment. Then archaeology adds another open layer to this story. In Cyprus, during the late Bronze Age, there were base-ring ceramic vessels once thought to resemble upside-down poppy capsules. And for decades, people linked them to the opium trade in the eastern Mediterranean, a vessel shaped like a poppy capsule, en ancienne trade route, a theory too tempting to ignore. But when researchers analyzed residues on some vessels from Cyprus and Israel, many results did not find opium, but perfumed oil. Later, some other studies on vessels that had been sealed found traces of opiates. History does not hand us a clean key. It gives us fragments. Some vessels held perfumed oil. Some may have held substances related to opium. There are medical texts, Galen's words, and the silence of ordinary people, therefore. The question of how ancient people withdrew from opium has no neat answer. They had no ancient secret. They had no professional center. They had no modern language. They had families, physicians, rituals, supervision, isolation, compassion, judgment. and sometimes helplessness. They controlled, hid, prayed, cared, scolded, cut off the supply, then hoped time would do the rest. But at the center of it all remains a very quiet scene. A person lying in the dark, trying to survive each hour without the thing the body is demanding. Beside them are people who do not know whether they are witnessing illness, sin, a curse, or a biological battle that their age did not yet have the language to understand. Perhaps withdrawal in the ancient world happened there, not in some elegant method, but in long nights when the drug had been hidden away, while the craving still sat in the room. The story returns to Marcus Aurelius. People remember him as a symbol of self-control. But if the hypothesis about opium around him contains some truth, then he himself shows the limits of that self-control. A philosopher may teach himself to endure, an emperor may command armies. But no one can simply issue an order and make the body fall silent at once. And perhaps that is the sharpest lesson of opium in ancient history. Not that humans are weak before pleasure, but that humans are always vulnerable before pain. When a substance promises to make pain fall silent, we often open the door to let it in. Before we have time to ask how long it will stay, opium was not only inside the vessel. It could move into sleep, into memory, into the family's fear, into the hesitant hands of a physician, into a Roman emperor, sitting before the work of the empire, trying not to feel drowsy. Then at night, unable to sleep. Perhaps the final question is not how ancient people withdrew from opium, but if even Marcus Aurelius had to negotiate with a drop of poppy resin, then how many nameless people throughout history lost that battle in silence? No one recorded their names, but their pain is still there in the gap between a life-saving medicine and a substance that forces a human being to fight placid, to regain the feeling of normality inside their own body.